Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. I actually hit the end of the music loop in the opening titles for Train Sim World 6. Good evening, guys. Good evening, AJ. Good evening, CD Radar. Good evening, Spectre. So nice to see you already on the chat before the stream has even begun. Read the disclaimer, please. As always, leave the railway installations and trains to the professionals in charge, because they are dangerous places and highly vulnerable. And let's enjoy everything connected with trains and railways from the safety of our homes. Today we will dig into something that might come as a surprise. Last week we have discussed high signal aspects on dwarf signals when we talked about the New Jersey Transit signaling system. Today we want to explore if there are actually high signal aspects on dwarf signals in German signaling, and surprisingly there are, but only in a very limited way. We're going to Leipzig Dresden for this, and Akura Moin, nearly late, almost late, yeah, and AJ Black, we 26-month subscription. Thank you so much, that is huge, and thank you for the ongoing support. As always, I got the game keys for free from DTG for being an ambassador, even more so now that I had to switch to Steam with my account until or because Epic Games Store is not supporting all the DLCs that we need to fill the layers. And we're going to run a freight service in the beginning. Nimburg, Lavny, Nadrashi to Osnabrück, 2 parts actually. And those 2 little services, or at least 1 little service in the beginning, and then we just start the second service to see what is happening there. Omega says CD Radar, Lul, and Lofty. Hey Tiger, just got back from shopping. Apologies for the lateness. So nice to have you on the stream, Lofty. Hope you're doing well, and hope you got something nice from shopping. Yeah. Dwarf signals in German signaling that show high signal aspects. A green light on a, well, if you want to call it a dwarf signal, a signal that is actually sitting down there in the dirt, in the ballast, and shows you a green light. It exists, but there are not that super many, but now since Leipzig Dresden we have them in the game. Another thing that I want to hear your opinion about, obviously, is latest reveal of DTG metro rivals racing subway trains in New York. People are, as we all can understand, divided about that, and I'd like to hear your opinion about that, definitely. So let's fix up our Vectron here, so that we cut in. Can run the service from Dresden like so many before.
Zugbeeinflussung. AFB. AFB.
M and P,
AFB.
okay. We can live with this. Signal lights. Spectres as well, not my cuppa, but I like some of the visual features for metro rivals. Yeah, well, if you come from train simulation, then it is obviously almost an insult, this game. If you like a fun game, and I had the opportunity to run it a bit while we were at Chatham for the visit with Dovetail Games. It is fun, but it seems, to be fair, a bit limited in what happens there. But well, we are playing an early version of the game, so we will have to see. Spectre says it is like switching from Assetto Corsa to Mario Kart. No offense. Yep, Mateo trains. Assetto Corsa. Super Mateo trains would it be, right? With Louis JD and both. Oh, this guy is no longer with DTG. Well, the way that I am seeing it, and I don't think that I am the only one here, is Gran Turismo 7 Spectre. Yeah, why not? It is a multiplayer game in Unreal Engine 5. So those are two things that we will probably never see with Train Sim World. We will never see it migrate to Unreal Engine 5, and we will never see multiplayer in Train Sim World because of the way it is built around one single center of the world that does not allow multiplayer. So if you want, you can see or look at Metro Rivals as a proof of concept of how Train Sim World technology, because they are using Train Sim World technology, can live in Unreal Engine 5 and the multiplayer environment. So 40 is announced here. Again, we will encounter the signaling error, I think it is to be called, because the repeater that we are getting, or the two repeaters that we are getting for this, that 40 is announced, will give us a KS2, a single yellow, what typically announces a red light. So those two repeaters that we are running under here, that one and the next one on the next gantry, is probably for the wrong path, for the straight ahead path. Unless I'm missing something in the signaling logic here. By the way, we come back to that later. Just to point it out again. Ooh la la. Photo mode sometimes gets us really out of a frame rate. Those mast signs on the Sperrsignale, on the Schotterzwergen, on the little light signals that sit in the ballast. Typically in the West we would have a white, red, white mast sign, just like on the high signals, but here in the East you often get this white one with the two black dots. We will come back to this later. Here the white, red, white would be typically what you also have. And what did I get for Zwangsbremsung now? I did not acknowledge whatever signal there was when branching off, because I was explaining. Oh no, suspector. Well, yeah, that happens if you got your head out of the window to explain mast signs and stuff, and you sometimes get out of your focus. So let's get this train moving again. Takes a bit until the brakes have released throughout the whole train. And now we're going into Friedrichstadt yard. Also here to the left, those little W signs. Like those. Quite unique to the eastern part of Germany. Now we get a distant signal warning us that we're running up to a red one. And we're going into one of those sidings at Friedrichstadt yard. And at the end, so where we actually are going to stop, there is one of those signals, one of those rare signals that are considered main signals, but at the same time they are sitting down in the dirt, in the ballast, so you can with some right call them dwarf signals. And surprisingly, those signals actually can give you a main signal aspect. Bing. The service ends when I'm uncoupling the service here, and then we will use our locomotive to drive into the siding. Here, look at those signals. Don't they look a bit weird to the eye? They can show a red light. What is not so unusual for a dwarf signal. We've known that in a lot of circumstances, but they have like a battery of 2x2, altogether 4 lights underneath this red light. And if you see them for the first time, you wonder what aspects can those signals actually show. And this is what I wanted to dig into a bit today, together with those W signs, those waiting boards. Well, first, let's actually uncouple our train. Let's see what light we can have. Maybe we want some light configuration of that kind. And look what the signal shows us now. Just like a big signal showing us a red light and HP 0, this signal can give us the HP 0 together with, and I almost said the SH1 signal, but we are in the east, so it is not an SH1 signal, but an RA12 signal. That allows us to pass this red light, but only as a shunting service. So at this point, having been a train coming from Dresden Hauptbahnhof, stopped here at the yard, now we are transitioning. This is why I actually switched my lighting configuration, because we are no longer a train now, but now that we are moving away our locomotive, this is a shunting service. And we can see that the lights are already green, and the Weichenwärter, the dispatcher for the shunting, allowed us to go. Since we are a shunting service, we have to adhere to 25 as a maximum speed. And as with the big ones, we need the override key to pass HP0 together with RA12. Still fighting a bit with the keyboard shorts here on my Vectron to acknowledge the speed change for the AFB. It is no longer Control F. So, unfortunately here, even though, no, not this map, even though the map tells us that this signal here is showing us RA12, it is actually not. It is only the little W, but the lamps are not lit. Since we are now a shunting service, we would have to adhere to those W signs and not pass them without permission. And the permission, as long as there are lights, are typically, or is typically dealt by lighting those two white lights. So we have to assume that for some reason the dispatcher could not light those two white lights and gave the permission orally or verbally and allowed us to pass those two waiting boards. Otherwise we would not have been allowed to pass them. Next thing here, we need to be very careful when going into this shunting neck, because you can see it looming. There is an EL6 sign that allows us not to proceed as an electric locomotive. And the reason for that is quite clear, because the overhead catenary ends after this sign. Still, we have to go quite close. Before we are allowed to stop in this service here. Again, why are we not allowed to go on? Because this sign here does not allow us to proceed as long as we are an electric locomotive, and the reason is because here is no electrification for this shunting neck beyond this point. That can be really hurtful if you drive your locomotive here, because that counts as passing a signal at danger. Inspector says, I think you passed it already, and I have to admit that I probably did. The thing is that in Train Sim World, stopping points and stuff are typically calculated from the driver's position, and we are actually sitting here with the driver's position where the sign is. Actually, my whole locomotive must stay behind the sign, right? So, this actually would constitute a violation of the sign, and we have passed the signal at danger. This is maybe not only tea and biscuits, this can actually cost us our license, passing a signal like this with an electric locomotive. Inspector says Tea und Kekse with the Herr Manager, yeah. If that is actually enough. So careful with those EL6 signs. They can be really, really damaging. And even if the game, respectively your shunting coach tells you to drive there, better ask twice if that is really necessary, and if this is what you want to do. So now we have seen those little dwarf signal can give us a red light. It can give us a red light together with the white RA12 lights that allow shunting. And now I promise that they can also give you a green aspect, like a high signal, and that is actually possible. And I dug it up, so I want to show it to you. If you want to play the second part of this service, Nimburg Lavny na Draží to Osnabrück. I only got a gold medal here because they gave me a locomotive that does not support 65 points for safety systems on when I played it the other day. We are not going to play the whole service, so don't be afraid. But only the beginning. They more or less put a different locomotive at this train that we just brought here, a 143. And just check out what this signal is doing. At the moment it is still giving us a red light. And now it switched to a green one. So that is a really rare case where you can have in German signaling a dwarf signal giving you a green light and therefore a high signal aspect. And that is more than the two white lights, because you can pass this as a train, not as a shunting service, and it gives you full information about you can go full track speed, and you can be properly sure that you will get a warning before the next signal at danger. With like a typical Sperrsignal, one of those dwarfs giving you only a SH1 or an RA12, you know that you can pass, but you never know what the next signal is, so you will have to always be prepared for stopping and driving on side. With that one, you can actually go. So, to prove to you that they can also show a yellow aspect, if they need to, I will turn off this disclaimer here and already put a different one in. Unfortunately, with more and more layers filled, it takes longer and longer for the game to boot in and out. Yes, and there is, I think, one scenario for the V90. Can't be contained. I just started because at the beginning we should get a yellow light on those dwarf signals. Can already prepare my presentation, because after that we were gonna have a little presentation before we play a different scenario with the Baureihe 200. Yes, City Reader, ICEL, when in Train Sim World. And here, don't worry about the scenario, just check out the signal. Red lamp here, green lamp here, yellow lamp here, and two white lights here for being able to show HL1, HL10, RA12 and HP0. Yeah, good thing that you mentioned the ICEL. Well, That would be the first time to have Talgo trucks, Talgo rodals in Trainsim World with the ECEL. From what I've seen, the ECEL cannot be run with its originally designed locomotives, the Baureihe 105, for whatever reasons, and they will be run by Vectron locomotives in a special livery for the ECEL, right? Also, the cab car does not work properly, or at least they cannot run it at the moment. So we have more or less a Flix train in white with 230 maximum, like comfort jets. Yes, so they will have Vectrons, can run maximum 230, and the cab cars don't work at the moment. And the Talgo Travka locomotives, the Baureihe 105, they still have to wait until they can pull the ECL. Oh no, suspect something went wrong with the ECL project. How surprising. No. Yeah, we will see how this works out. Another thing that went wrong, you might have noticed it if you go into Leipzig Dresden and want to run the indestructible V90. You can see that the journey more or less has been destroyed and has not been proved indestructible at all. The scenarios and services seem to work though, but the journey setup needs to be fixed again. What I wanted to play is the Chemical Chaos scenario. But before that we will have the presentation, and I will change the service marker here. And as soon as we are in, I will stop the game and we will go into the presentation. Because there are actually a lot of those signals that we're talking about. We can see in this scenario, and we can discuss two things at least that I always wanted to discuss with people in the know. Whether this is actually correct signaling or not. So where is my OBS again? Presentation. Can I get it to go? Yes, here we are. So dwarf signals and waiting boards in German signaling. German signaling, and now that we are running Dresden Leipzig, we always have to keep in mind that we have more or less two traditions in German signaling: the Western tradition from the Bundesrepublik Deutschland and the Eastern tradition mit der Deutschen Reichsbahn in der Deutschen Demokratischen Republik. And we have two different lines of development that have been combined after the reunification in 1990, but there are still some differences between the two parts, because you cannot just replace all the signals and all the things to unify them. So we still have two areas more or less. One is in the west, that is often called the DS 301. The Signalbuch is 301, and DS is, what is it, Druckschrift, and in the Eastern it was Dienstvorschrift, DV. So DV 301 is the code for the Eastern tradition, DS 301 is the code for the Western tradition. And you know that for high signals in Germany we typically use or used in the West before we got the KS signals, and then it got a bit modified, typically Hauptsignale, Vorsignale, distance signals, and then main signals. And in the East they had it after the war, but replaced it with the Russian influenced HL signals that are still main signals and distance signals, but with the HL signaling aspects. In terms of dwarf signals, unlike the American signaling systems that can have more or less almost all the high signal aspects in some way also expressed in dwarf signals, we only have in the Western tradition the Sperrsignale, those signals here. They can be read showing HP0. I left the semaphore variants away, and they can be switched if you can go to SH1. What are the two white lights rising from left to right? This is what those signals can switch from one to the other. And they are typically sitting in the ballast. They can be put on a mast, and then they can be ein hochstehendes Sperrsignal, a high standing lockup signal if you want, and it serves some kind of a different purpose, or it can actually act as a higher quality signal in dispatching. For example, a train can end only on a high standing Sperrsignal, not on a low one, in just for terms of visibility. And there are other rules that distinguish between whether those signals are on a stick or whether they are sitting on the floor. But the interesting thing is, at the beginning, we cannot have any distinguishing aspects here. We can only have stop and go. We can have SH1 allowing the train or the shunting service to pass the signal, or the red light, what is HP0, then that stops the train from passing. In terms of shunting signals, in the sense that they are only applicable to the shunting services, because those signals here, they are valid for train services and shunting services alike, just as the one above. Typically we have the Wartezeichen, the waiting boards, and those are those orange W signs that typically have or have not white lamps attached to them. And you see them a lot more in the east, because in the west they have been replaced by those Sperrsignale a lot. It is a bit more expensive to have the Sperrsignale running instead of the waiting boards. They are still in place somewhere, but in the east they are much more common, and they are a bit like, you know, those white boards with the red dot in the British system with the stop marker on it, and similar signs in the Dutch system, for example, or a red flag more or less in many American systems. You have to stop there with your shunting service, and you cannot go on unless you get the permission of the dispatcher for the yard, what is called the Weichenwärter, the switch attendant in German terms. It is called an RA11. And the thing is, if it has lamps attached to it, then those lamps can be lit, and they show then an SH1 signal aspect. So the SH1 signal aspect appears here and here, and this is how the Weichenwärter, the dispatcher for the shunting, allows the shunting service to pass this sign. Then there are some versions of this sign that do not have lamps attached. It is nevertheless called an RA11. And how does the dispatcher for the shunting allow the shunting service to pass this sign? By verbal permission. So this can be done by just shouting it to the train driver, or typically he would more often than not use the radio and just tell the driver, you can pass the waiting board number so and so in that direction. It is also allowed by the rules to do it with raising the arm, or especially at night with raising a white lamp, but because those two things are typically a bit prone to misunderstandings, they are limited to those signs without lamps. So if there are lamps, then typically you need the lamps to have the permission to pass it. If there are no lamps, then it is usually the verbal permission to pass those signals. And in some cases it is also okay, if there cannot be any misunderstanding, to do it with the arm sign or the white lamp. Raising the arm or the white lamp are obviously the signs that you would have used before you had mobile phones and radio and all that stuff. So in what cases are lamps attached, in which cases are no lamps attached? Well, the thing with the lamps attached are the higher quality signals. So if this signal actually protects the shunting service from running into main tracks where typically trains run with higher speeds, then you would have the lamps attached. If this RA11 sign only protects you with your shunting service to run into another shunting track, a secondary track, a Nebengleis, where there are no trains typically running, then the Flankenschutz, the flank protection, does not need to be as good as when you are actually protecting trains that run with higher speeds. So if you want to protect main tracks, Hauptgleise, where you have to expect trains to run with higher speeds, then you at least need the RA11 with the lamps, and not the RA11 without lamps that are more or less more prone to errors, and so it is only okay to protect shunting services from going into other shunting services. So this is more or less the idea of this RA11 sign without lamps and with lamps. And in the East it is a bit different, not really a lot different, but so different that it reads really confusing if you read it up in the Richtlinie 301. In the Eastern tradition, you also have those yellow W boards with lamps attached to it. It is not called an RA11 then, but it is an RA11A according to DV 301. Yeah, so it is a different name for the signal aspect, even though it looks the same, and they are much more common, as I have said before. And the version of this waiting board without lamps is not orange but white and has a different name again. It is the RA11B. For the one with the lamps attached, the RA11A, you will have to show the white lamps to allow the shunting service to pass it, and this is because we are in the eastern part, not an SH1 but an RA12 according to DV301. So it looks the same, it has quite a similar meaning but not exactly the same, and because of the different logic in the in the signaling in the east and in the west, that it has a bit of a different meaning, what also results in the different mast signs that we have seen in the beginning of the stream here. But here you see we have more or less the same idea. There are some waiting boards with lamps attached to protect the main tracks if they have to provide flank protection, and the lesser important or less important signals that would not have lamps attached, it would use this one, just like in the west, the W sign without lamps, but here in the east it also has a different color. It is not orange but it is white. So this is why those whiteboards you only find in Eastern Germany, but you have similar functioning signals in the west, but they are orange, but they just don't have any lamps. And again, you would require a verbal permission, and in some cases it is also okay to raise your arm and or a white lamp to allow that. In case that the white signals break or don't work, if there is a malfunction, then you can resort to this verbal permission in case of the waiting boards with the lamps attached, not though to the arm raising and white lamp permission. This is typically only possible for the ones without lamps. So this is the secret of those different waiting boards: RA11, RA11A according to DV301, and RA11B to DV301, with lamps, without lamps. Here SH1, here the lamps are called RA12 according to DV301. In the east, there are also those dwarf versions of those waiting boards. They are not sitting on a stick, not sitting on a mast, but they have those little compact thingies in a block where you can light the 2 white lamps. So those are also versions of this signal that require you to light the 2 white lamps to show RA12 so the train can pass. Do they use Sperrsignale in the east? Yes, but to a lesser extent than in the west, sometimes with 2 red lamps, sometimes with only 1 red lamp. In both cases it is HP0, and they typically do not have the white red white mast sign, but they have this white mast sign with the 2 red dots attached to it. What is the difference? For the HP0 it does not make a difference at all. If it is showing a red light, you have to stop, regardless whether you are a train or a shunting service. You cannot pass it. If it shows the 2 white lights, then it shows in the east an RA12 and not an SH1. And why is this important here? If you read it up in the 301 Richtlinie, the SH1 means Fahrverbot aufgehoben, driving restriction lifted. That means you can pass the signal regardless whether you are a train or are a shunting service. You can pass the signal. Whereas the RA12 only says shunting permitted, Rangierfahrt erlaubt. So this in the east, the 2 white light only allow shunting, not the train. In the west, the 2 white lights allow both to pass this signal, and therefore you have this special mast sign that tells you again, for a train, a Sperrsignal that shows RA12, you can disregard it. That is a bit a complicated way to put it out, because in both ways train services and shunting services alike can pass this signal here, but in the east it is called with a different name. It has a different meaning, and so this needs to be fixed with a different mast sign that does not require a train to stop. Here this mast sign would require a train to stop if it only is shown together with a signal that allows only shunting. The next thing that results from this is that also a dark signal, dwarf signal with this mast sign, can be ignored by a train, not so by a shunting service. In the east they also have those high Sperrsignale on a stick that function in a way like the low ones, but well, are better visible, more visible from further away, and therefore can be used for more sophisticated maneuvers. Yes, the dark one in the west, unfortunately, would be shown together with a white red white mast sign, and then you have to respect the mast sign in stop and can only pass it with a written order here. Yeah, and now what we actually dug into to see, are there in German signaling dwarf signals that can show high signal aspects, and this is a thing that only happens in the east. Ein niedrigstehendes Hauptsignal. There is one signal too much. It is only niedrigstehendes Hauptsignal, so it's a low standing main signal. Just the one that we have seen in the service here. It can show HP0. It can show HP0 together with RA12. This is nothing new. We know that from the high signals. In the east, HP0 can be shown with RA12. In the west, HP0 can be shown with SH1. And those signals only allow shunting services to pass. And now the really revolutionary thing, those low riding main signals can show high signal aspects like the HL1, or with the yellow light the HL10. Expect the next signal to be red. And even in some cases, if those signals can be used as home signals when you're coming from the track for the opposite direction, they can be shown together with a ZS1, an Ersatzsignal, so that the train can enter the station on Ersatzsignal, Zugfahrt mit besonderem Auftrag, auf besonderen Auftrag then. And this can be shown, we have discussed this in the video about the opposite track movements, the Gegengleisverkehr in Germany. So this is also one of the things that those little low-standing main signals can show. Yeah, that's that. So let's try to put it together. If you are a train, which signals allow you to proceed? Obviously the green ones, also the distance signals that are yellow allow you to proceed. Same thing in the HL system, but not so the red ones. And as a train, even the two white lights on the red signal do not allow you to pass. You have to transition into a shunting service if you want to proceed. With the low standing main signals, the same aspects, green and yellow, allow you to proceed, and the same as here, the red ones, even together with the two white lights as a train, do not allow you to proceed. Together with the Ersatzsignal ZS1 allow you to proceed as a train mit besonderem Auftrag. Sperrsignale, the original dwarf signals, obviously the red ones block you as a train, you may not pass. Same for the high standing ones. The SH1 in the west allow, yeah, Hauptsignal, Signal, sorry Lofty, I just realized that I doubled that up, just in case you weren't sure it was a signal, yeah. I was so flabbergasted that they can actually show the main signal aspects, so that I got this wrong, sorry. SH1 allows also train to pass. This is why the SH1 allows you to pass a white, red, white signal, mast sign. In the east, the RA12 only allows shunting services to pass. This is why we need the special mast sign with the two black dots that allow a train to ignore the signal if it is showing RA12. So it can pass, and at the same time it allows the train to ignore the signal if it is dark. Whereas in the west, if the Sperrsignal is dark and has this white, red, white mast sign, in my understanding, this signal would block a train. So here is a difference between west and east. And Riesa says, I wouldn't be surprised if it was grammatically correct. No, I'm afraid it is not. This is just a tiger mistake. Yeah, and for a train, all the stuff with those W boards, white or yellow lamps or no lamps, lamps on or off, arms raised or arms not raised, whatever, it can just be ignored as a train, because those signs are not relevant for a train. A train can pass them regardless of what they show and what kind they are. They can just pass by. They are only relevant for shunting services. And this is what we check out now. Where is the difference for shunting services? Shunting services, obviously, a red light also blocks shunting services. Was a different thing a couple of years ago when shunting services were not blocked by a single red light, but those times are gone. So the red light, the HB0, also blocks shunting services. But now the two additional white lights on the red light allow a shunting service to pass. Same thing with the low standing main signal. And here, this is actually an interesting thing. This is what I wanted to discuss with you, if you have an opinion on that. In my opinion, an Ersatzsignal can only allow a train to pass, not a shunting service. So if you have a red light together with a ZS1, I think the Signalbuch 301 tells you that Zusatzsignale, ZS signals, are only applicable for train services, not for shunting services. And so I don't think that you can allow a shunting service to pass this signal together with a ZS1. It's also difficult because when passing a signal on a ZS1, you become a Zugfahrt auf besonderen Auftrag, and that means that you are a train service, a Zugfahrt, and not a shunting service. So I think you can only pass it as a train service, not as a shunting service. The radar, why wouldn't he just put RA12 there? Where would he put RA12 instead of the ZS1? True, exactly. That is what I am wondering. We will get in the scenario to a point where we actually get not this version of a ZS1, but the flashing white light version of a ZS1. And I would rather have expected an RA12 in this context, but we will see. Whether it is in this situation that we encounter in the scenario correct or not is a bit beyond me, because in the game you never know exactly whether you are a train service or a shunting service, but can discuss this. So this is an interesting fact. I think as a shunting service, HP0 plus ZS1 does not allow you to pass. You need to be a train service or become a train service in this case, if you are allowed to pass it here. Yeah, that is another thing that can be discussed actually. As a shunting service, are you allowed to pass a dark Sperrsignal with this mast sign? In the end, I think ASRTO, hello there, nice to have you in the chat. I think it is okay to pass it because you don't have a red-white sign, and the description for the white mast sign with the two black dots does not require any shunting services to stop. Did someone mention a Spanish train in Germany? Yes, the ECL. Without the Spanish locomotives at the moment, unfortunately. I'd love to have Talgo Rodals in the game to see if they are actually as cool as they are supposed to be. Well, and then obviously as a shunting service we have to differentiate with those waiting boards. RA11 Western style without lamps, we cannot pass it. Same with RA11A Eastern style, we cannot pass it with the white lamps. And the RA11 in the West without lamps, as well as the RA11B in the East, we cannot pass unless we have the permission. If the lamps are on, we can pass it. If we have the permission, we can pass it as well. So this is the difference between train services and shunting services, especially here with the red light together with the SH1, respectively the RA12. This allows only shunting services to pass. The Ersatzsignal ZS1 allows only train services to pass, in my opinion. And with the dark signals here, West versus East, I think shunting services can pass it in the East, the dark signals. They cannot pass the dark signals in the West. But correct me on that if I got something wrong here. And I hope better ride quality than Talgo Avril rate quality. And CD Radio says, no, I would disagree that you can run a signal that is dark. How do you know it's not a red light fault? Yeah, well, that is the thing with the mast sign. If it does not have a white mast sign, you do not even know that it is a signal that can probably be red at this point. So maybe as a shunting service you have to stop in front of the signal. As a train service, because of this mast sign, you can run the dark signal, even if it is maybe a red light fault. And to be more restrictive for a shunting service, I don't think that this makes sense at this point. But I put this up for discussion and for being educated by someone who actually knows how those things happen and how those things work. For the train services, a dark hallucinous Sperrsignal together with this mast sign is deliberately a thing that you can pass. Can debate whether an hallucinous signal is only an extinguished signal, is only one that has been on and then went off. But that can also be a fault, right? So, that's the presentation for today. I have one more thing that I want to put up for discussion, but that comes late in the scenario that we are running now. This morning you're tasked with running a local freight train down to the chemical works in Weißig, collect the tank wagons and check in with the staff when you arrive. Alright, so we are supposed to take tank cars to the chemical factory. PZB, SIFA, stand in the driver's position. Unlock the control stand. Turn the signal light to headlight. They typically want you to only turn on those two lights. No lights at the back. If that is a proper setup for a shunting locomotive, not entirely sure. Indirect brake cutoff. I don't want to turn on the compressor, I turn it on anyway. Set the handbrakes to release. Set the reverser to forward. Set the traction lock emergency brake release to release. That is that one here. That always applies the brakes when we are standing about. And then we can move. Before we can move, always a good idea to ask the signaler if we are good to go. The Weichenwärter in this case. And let's see what signals we are encountering here on our way to our platform in Riesa. SH2 over there. An HL10 repeater. So nothing too exciting at the moment. Diesel power, yes, you can hear it. Here, for example, you can see one of those white RA11B according to DV301. This is one of those waiting boards that protect only shunting tracks. No lamps, so you would need a verbal permission, or even the permission with the arm or the light would work. Whereas those orange ones, you can see, unfortunately, even with the safety systems on, we're getting only 35 points. And here you can see the lamps. 1, 2, and 1 lamp to light it up for the night. And if we are lucky, and here in this scenario it actually works, the Weichenwärter has switched on the 2 white lamps to give us the RA12. That allows us to pass the signal here. As a shunting service, we are limited to 25 kilometers. We could go a bit faster, but I'm going deliberately so slow that I don't run into overspeed and have enough time to watch everything from the outside. In Riesa you have those old water cranes for your steam engines. not in use anymore. But always nice to see. SH2 signs used to block those two tracks. Lower the coupler. Yeah, probably talking about this coupler, where I still have not found the proper switch. By the way, CD Radar, you pointed out that Kupplung, I think this is only the hill start clutch. Kupplung in Germany also means a clutch, and with that you can hold the brake, and if you want to start your train on a hill. Probably not connected with actually uncoupling with those fast couplers here. But again, if someone knows better, let me know. Dispatcher. Alright. Proceed at restricted speed. So why the dispatcher, the Weichenwärter, does not light those two lights for an RA12 together with the HP0 in this situation, I don't know. Actually, you would probably need a written order. So they have it wrong, the CD Radar. Yeah, I think this is a translation fault. Spectre, no idea either about the coupler. Learning to operate the 294 left me half traumatized anyway. It is not so easy to operate, right? But it is actually nice if you get into it a bit. It is... Coupling is not so easy with it, in my opinion. Well, the game thinks that it shows you an RA12 here. If you look at it. No, it only gives you an HP0. Now it was a different situation. At any rate, the dispatcher said we are allowed to proceed with restricted speed. Let's say we got a written order to do so. And CD Radar, I've never looked into it and I don't know if it works like that in Germany, but the shunting signals should only go out after the entire train leaves the previous block. Unlike the main signals which turn red immediately after passing through. Can actually be different for the Ersatzsignal. There you have a lot of special rules for that. That you can even pass the signal after it has extinguished. At any rate, you need your override key to pass it. Why it gave us a Zwangsbremsung here, I cannot really tell you. Maybe because it combined the starting program together with the Befehl 40 program. Not entirely sure. Not entirely sure that this is not a bug. Can see the alternate flashing of 70 and 85. Well, we weren't really faster than 20, were we? So, we have to couple to those tank cars up front. Probably have to slow down a bit and then push against them to cover. So, let's see where we are. We are still away. We have to release our brakes again. Alright, now we have to uncouple 15 vehicles because we're only taking 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good thing we have Hank on board and he can uncouple here. Now probably he does not want to go to Weißig on the cars, so come back into the cab and run with us. And now we are supposed to go forward. That means we're switching direction. Every time we're switching direction we should actually inform the Weichenwärter. Now you can see how the dispatcher lit the 2 white lights on this miniature version of the waiting boards. What is also necessary, what is only necessary because we are a shunting service. They actually brake quite nicely, those cars. This time we go a bit further along the platform because we have to stop at this red light over there. Again, train service or shunting service, we have to respect this red light and cannot pass it. Set the power brake controller, yes. And now we're getting a high signal aspect, 40 and go at this point. And well, they want to just send us on the road here now. The thing is, in my opinion, now we are transitioning from a shunting service into a train service because we are going out on the open track. Being allowed to do so by a main signal aspect, Fahrtstellung eines Hauptsignals. But if we are a train on the open track, then we should actually have a Spitzensignal, the 3 white lights. So at this point we should turn on the center light at the front And since we are supposed to go a bit faster and not plot along the main track with 40, we should also get the gear selector to long distance, because only im Streckengang long distance we can go with 80. Shunting we can only go 40. So this is the preparation I think that we should do if we go out on the open track with our V90 locomotive. And then we can release the brake and go on our way. No need to acknowledge anything. At least so I thought. My PCB system thought otherwise. But seriously, it was a 40 now and go signal. This does not need to be acknowledged. Prove me wrong if you know better, but this was not a signal that needs acknowledging. The magnet was on nonetheless. I venture to say that this was weird. And I was not beyond the 40, was I? Because I was still in the 40 corridor, so I did not violate the starting program either. That ended now, for some weird reason. We're going across all those switches so that we are on the rightmost track. And now that we can increase our speed to 80. Here you can see the rotations per minute in your diesel engine. And now we are running on high signal aspects. Did anyone give us... Yes, a Zugschluss, perfect. An end signal. Going to pass the branch to Röderau. Now we are approaching the dead section. What do we need to do on the V90 in the dead section? Do we need to switch off the diesel engine? Well, obviously trick question. We don't need to do anything. We are not getting our juice from the overhead catenary, but from our diesel engine. We can just run through it. More kilometers and then we are at Weißig, at the chemical works. So what do you guys think about the V90, the Baureihe 294 in Train Sim World 5? All the train simulator driver wrote somewhere, it is just not fun to drive. I do not really agree with this assessment. It is a whole different driving experience compared to other locomotives. But I am happy that they chose this locomotive to be the deluxe locomotive for Train Sim World 6 for the German route. Inspector says they should have done this or the nice Bauer 211, 212 in the first place, not the 204 on mine Spessart. Well, yeah. Not a shunting fan, no fan of shunters, but just my humble opinion. Now we have to adhere to this and slow down to 40. CD radar, well, of course you disagree. Is there anything in the game that you really don't like? Well, I don't think there is anything that I really don't like, but there are some things that are not so much fun for me. Like so far the Cardiff Central route, for example. That was a route that I did not enjoy so much. Then I'm annoyed if there are signaling errors like in some situations you have your signaling sequence broken by the end of shunt boards. But the 294 I actually enjoy. Definitely. So 40 and stop here. And I'm also happy that they did the 204, because it's the only one with this weird HZB Anzeigegerät. Otherwise we would not have a locomotive for that. So, we are still a train, I'm quite sure, because we are allowed into the sidings with the main signal aspect. Have to stop in front of the red signal in front of us. In the background you can see the chemical works. Testing how it works here. Alright, now we should uncouple, it says. We're uncoupling, then we're applying the brakes fully, otherwise the cars can run away. So good thing Hank is here, and Hank can uncouple manually, because we have not found any switch to uncouple this thing from the cab. Yeah, and now we are supposed to run the locomotive around, and that means we're running the locomotive straight ahead. And this is the situation where we are allowed to pass this red signal here, not with an RA12, but with a ZS1. Apparently the signal here does not allow to show the RA12, but only the ZS1. In my opinion, we still stay a train service, because if we transitioned into a shunting service at this point, then we couldn't pass the signal. But again, correct me if I'm wrong in this assessment. So again we pass a red signal with authority at this point now, because they are giving us an Ersatzsignal set as 1. And we become a Zugfahrt auf besonderen Auftrag. I did not turn on Command 40 as expected is, Befehl 40. To pass it. What I did not do deliberately not is to turn on the red lights at the back of our locomotive, because it wouldn't be okay to show the Zugschluss at the locomotive after we have left cars in the track, right? Now we're probably transitioning into a shunting service. At any rate, The dispatcher thinks that we need an RA12 with our waiting board. What we would not need where we... a train service still. That means... we probably want to have lights at the front of our locomotive. If we do the same light setup that we had before. Maybe it's also okay to shunt the way that we shunted before without lights on this end. But I'm always more happy to have lights in the direction that we are going. In case we haven't done it, tell the signaler that we are coming. Didn't we discuss the existence of 5 Tafeln in German signaling the other day? Because of course now that we will actually encounter 2 of them. We're actually running downhill. That blue lamp is the SIFA indicator. Picking up speed quite fast. So any signal that we have to respect here? Probably not. The waiting board at the beginning was good enough. There is a Gleissperre to the left. Here, that one. That could block us. But it didn't. Now we are approaching those 5 Tafeln. And are going behind this waiting board. Quite steep downhill here. Debatable whether we should have not retracted this coupler before. At any rate, we need the coupler on this end now. Now we contact the signaler that he lets us pass this waiting board by lighting those lamps. Let's see if he does light them. Unfortunately, he doesn't. He only gives us verbal transmission. Maybe because it is broken. At any rate, we're not getting our lights. Now, in case for a hill start, we're actually sitting in an incline. If you want to hold the brake a bit, you can use this button. So that you don't roll backwards. The Gleissperre here would not allow us to pass us here. Gleissperre is what you would call a derail probably in America or the United Kingdom. that rather derails the train before something worse happens. Ponks and coupled. Set the reverser to reverse. Joystick in the middle, and then let's go. Signaler. What does the signaler need to do? In this case, you can see the signaler lights the RA12 that goes with this HP0 signal. Wrong direction. Red light, 2 white lights around in the east, HP0 with RA12. We can pass it, but definitely only as a shunting service. We already switched direction. And we can go. Again, don't forget the command 40. Befehl 40, PCB override. As soon as the sound turns off, and we're going into the track to the chemical works. It's funny, if you turn the camera around, you almost hear the SIFA. No more. And now, we just wait, the wagons you just delivered. Why are they empty? We don't need these. Send them back to Riesa. That's rare, right, in the game, that something does not work out. Well, guys, why did you order them if you don't need them? Now we have to take them back to Riesa. Holzköpf. And now I have to shunt them out backwards with the wagons at front. Hank has to stand here all the way so we don't run into anything. Hank got cut. Get well soon, Hank, says Spectre. Yeah, he got kicked off his stand by one of those lampposts. Well, that's Hank for us. He always has to do all the dirty work and take all the risks. But I can feel him. I crashed with my horse in the woods this week. So I probably feel like Hank. Getting kicked off the tank car by a lamp post. So, back to our waiting board, and this time the signaler actually found the button to switch on the two lights for the RA12, so we can pass it easily. Now they extinguished because we passed. Alright. How long is our train? 88 meters. So that we know when to stop. Set the reverser to reverse. Get the power brake controller to release a brake, and then I think they want to send us already. Yeah, they give us a high signal aspect 40 and go. Let's see if this time we can go without a Zwangsbremsung. Again, we need a Spitzensignal so that we can run as a train, long distance setting on the gearbox so that we can go 80. And after having released the brake, we can run back home. We don't need to acknowledge a signal like this. 40 and go. There is no Vorsignal function whatsoever that would require us to go slow. We have to adhere to the 40 obviously because we're going across the switches. And one more because we have to arrive on the right side of the track again. And it's going downhill a bit, so that we have to be careful with the speed. Inspector, part 2 of the scenario in expert mode. calculate the macroeconomic damage of driving the empty cars around. Yes, exactly. I wonder how often that happens in real life. That cars end up where they are not supposed to be and stuff like that. I think we can accelerate to 80. We are out of the switches. Why did I brake now? Got confused with the joystick, apparently. And when we get back to Riesa, I have one more expert question for everybody. Given the fact that we are probably not a train that is running along to a regular timetable, but we are more like an ad hoc train now, taking back those cars. Gelegenheitsverkehr. Oh, we forgot Hank on the tanks. We should have gotten him back into the cab. He could have said something. Dead section again. approaching the junction to Rüderau. And the last bit to Riesa. Always happy to see this special 4-signal board here. There's one in the opposite direction too. So now I have to be careful a bit, because we already get our distance signal with a flashing yellow. It gave us 1000 Hertz. So we have to slow down below the 70. Well, that's not so hard. We also have to prepare for the drop in line speed to 80. What is also not so hard and should not give us a new 1000 Hertz, because we are not traveling faster than 95. A repeater. And this here seems actually to be one of those... one of those rare cases where the repeater is armed with a 1000 Hertz magnet. Down to 40. 40 and stop. Going uphill into Riesa, so we need a bit more power again. We are still a train service, obviously, because we are coming in from the open track. Even though we are slowed down to 40. Therefore, we do not need an RA12 on the waiting boards here, because as a train we can just pass them. But we have to prepare to stop at the next signal. Even though the game maybe does not need or does not think we need to stop there. But what happens now? We are a train approaching a red signal, and we can see that the RA12 is already lit on this signal. Can we just pass on? Do we need to stop in front of this red signal? The thing is, what is clear is that we cannot pass this signal as a train. Since we can't pass this signal as a train, we have to transition into a shunting service. Transitioning from a train into a shunting service usually requires you to stop in front of this signal and then to pass it. So that typically the signaler would more often than not light the RA12 after you came to a stop in front of the signal, probably. There is an exception that you can transition from a train into a shunting service at a signal of that kind if your train number if your train number is in the so-called Streckenbuch, what is a collection of the local directives. That leaves me with the interesting question: if you don't stop at the signal like this and your train number is not in the Streckenbuch, what happens then? Do you get tea and biscuits because you did not stop while transitioning from a train into a shunting service? Or did you not transition at all, stayed at train service, and get fired for having passed the signal at danger? If anyone can answer this, that'd be really interesting. And Cahoon Josh, the signal is just a recommendation, you only live once. Yes, we call dispatch and figure out which train weighs more. If it is us, we have right of way. Alright, that's a thing to approach it. So your guess is as good as mine. But if anyone who really knows would be interesting to discuss this. Do we pass the signal at danger, or do we violate the rule that we have to stop while transitioning from a train service into a shunting service? We just let them know, says Cahoon Josh, our windshield was a little dirty, we couldn't see that signal, it was a maintenance issue. And we sue our company for damages. So, I think this is the last thing that we do in this scenario. Get this train to a safe stop. Go to the office, explain why we are back here with the empty cars. That the yokels at the chemical works just ordered and then did not want. So radio. Welcome back to Riesa. Don't worry too much about the delivery not being made this trip. Stable the locomotive and head over to the office to explain the misunderstanding. This is the other way of saying come on tea and biscuits. And Cahoon Josh says we noticed the red signal, but in light of environmental concerns and saving fuel energy, we didn't stop. Yeah, we thought it would be like a don't stop and proceed with restricted speed. They can't get mad at us for saving the planet. Well, that's the thing with G markers and K markers and all the stuff that allows heavy trains to go on and not to stop at red lights. Anyway, that was this scenario. A lot of different aspects and signals that happened in this scenario, so I think it makes a lot of sense to discuss it when discussing dwarf signals in German signaling, and we have seen a couple of them that can actually show a main signal aspect. Guys, if you have an opinion to my question that I put there up in the end, just let me know. Would be really interesting for me to know what you think about it. And apart from that, I think I will call it a day. Maybe I will be back later with a B-reel driving a train from Leipzig to Dresden all the way. Microphone on as always, but no presentation, no discussion of signal aspects, just running the train, the line. Like in half an hour, 10:30. That sounds somehow reasonable. So much for now. Thank you so much for staying with me, for the ongoing support, and have a great night. We may see something British and less shunty sometime, Akura. Definitely. We will get back to British stuff on Tuesday. You will see something British, because then the Birmingham crew will be released, and traditionally on release day I want to do a release or unboxing stream if there is no official one from DTG. If so, then I will probably move it one day in one or the other direction, but sometime during the week we will have an unboxing stream that is less shunty, that is more British. Then we will run the British Transport Police, the Zero, for example, and then we will be back. Alright guys, thanks for your support, for bearing with me, and see you soon. Akura says thank you, see you next time. For today I'm out, every early shift tomorrow, then get some sleep, and yeah, I will probably be back, and see you around whenever you feel like it again. Bye bye.